Hey, it's Debbie, and I wanted to share a little information about my guest today before she comes on the show. Martha Carlin and I are talking about the glycocalyx layer, and she brought this term to me. I never even heard of it a year ago, and I got into a deep dive correlation between healing our gut, leaky brain, and really I've been asking Martha about how we can avoid Parkinson's, cognitive decline. So, Martha and I have done a few different podcasts together. She's become a friend of mine and got to meet her in person in San Diego this past August at a conference in town. And it's really interesting to understand this microscopic sugar protein layer called glycocalyx. And if there's a connection to our gut, brain, and vascular health looking at this glycocalyx. And actually just heard a podcast this week by one of my favorites, Ben Bickman, on glycocalyx. So I think we're on to something. So in this episode, Martha and I dive into the glycocalyx and talk about all things related to it. We kind of go on different tangents. So I wanted to do this extra intro on what the heck we are even talking about. So, first of all, Martha is the founder of BiotiQuest and the BioCollective. And I've talked about those products a lot, her probiotic and the sugar shift. We'll talk a little bit about today as I use that to make Dr. William Davis's super gut yogurt, that ProGurt. I like to use the word ProGurt. And understanding why you might need to do this. Now, we're going to explore the glycocalyx, the gut microbiome, and something I'm very interested in, the blood-brain barrier as I get older, and how all this works together to protect our energy, our metabolism, and cognitive health. And then what happens when they break down. So Martha will share her inspiring story in our previous episodes about how she turned her husband's Parkinson's diagnosis into a mission, a scientific mission, leading her to the creation of Sugar Shift and other probiotics they have on their website. This is a probiotic culture that she designed to rebalance sugar metabolism in the gut. So we'll talk a little bit about the science on how this unique formulation helps convert glucose into beneficial metabolites as mannitol, which support both metabolic and neurological resilience. So we'll go into the glycocalyx, how inflammation, oxidative stress, and high blood sugar all erode your cellular barriers, the role of gut dysbiosis and endotoxins, LPS, lipopolysaccharides that are involved in triggering this leaky gut and leaky brain, and how we'll look at root cause solutions to rebuild and protect your glycocalyx gut lining and blood-brain barrier. I always like to look at what are some nutritional therapy options and lifestyle strategies to lower our overall inflammation and how we can boost nitric oxide, as well as how BiotiQuest Sugar Shift helps redirect sugar metabolism and improve mitochondrial health. So if you've been wondering how your gut health connects to your brain clarity, to your focus and longevity, this episode will connect the dots between your microbiome, metabolism, and mind. So you can learn more in this episode, but really understanding how we put this all together. So let's start with the glycocalyx if we didn't explain it well enough in this episode. Think of it as your body's Teflon coating. It's a sugar protein coating that lines every cell in your body, especially your blood vessels, your gut, and your brain. So I think of it as a slippery gel-like shield that keeps everything flowing smoothly. So think about what it does when it's broken and damaged. Because when it's working well, this Teflon coating is preventing bacteria, toxins, and platelets from sticking to the vessel walls. It regulates what passes in and out of the bloodstream. And it plays a huge role in what I'm learning from Dr. Nathan Bryan on nitric oxide signaling, which controls blood flow and oxygen delivery to your tissues and to your brain. But here's what I want to dive into. There's a catch. The glycocalyx is very fragile. And when it can be damaged and how it can connect to what drives chronic disease, high blood sugar, inflammation, oxidative stress, toxins, and chronic stress. When it breaks down, your vascular and intestinal barriers become leaky, and that's where the trouble begins. So when the barriers break, we have problems. If we get leaky gut and a leaky brain, we need to address the issue. So when your gut-brain barrier is broken down, we want to work backwards. When your gut barrier becomes compromised, why does it become compromised? We need to address that issue. Toxins and bacterial fragments, as we talk about LPS, when you have that gut wall lining broken down, now LPS, endotoxins, can leak through this broken down gut barrier, this wall. Now they enter the rest of the body, get out into the bloodstream. And when those foreign objects enter, our immune system reacts. When immune system reacts, inflammation rises. Over time, that becomes chronic, and that inflammation is going to weaken the blood-brain barrier. So now, these same inflammatory molecules can enter our brain. Now, we have what's called leaky brain. And this is where these microglia cells get activated, leading to brain fog, fatigue, mood issues, and eventually what I'm trying to avoid, cognitive decline. So the gut-brain connection is central to nearly every chronic condition, from metabolic dysfunction to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I don't know about you, I'm scared of this cognitive decline, dementia, Parkinson, Alzheimer's. But this is where Martha's work is coming in handy and helping me understand in middle age what I can do for my future self. So through BiotiQuest, Martha and her team have developed the Sugar Shift probiotic culture designed to reprogram how your body handles sugar starting in the gut. So instead of letting the glucose or fructose cause inflammation and oxidative stress, the Sugar Shift bacteria convert excess sugars into mannitol. And that's a sugar alcohol that does not spike your blood sugar and actually supports neurological health. So these strains of bacteria also produce antioxidants. They are reducing your endotoxin load and helping rebuild the microbiome diversity. And this will help improve your metabolic health and your brain health. So what I'm trying to do on this show, talking about how we can be fit and healthy from the inside out at a cellular level. And this is a brilliant example of how we can take ownership of our health today to improve our future self, to improve our microbiome. And understanding the microbiome is not just helping us, not working on just digestion, but cellular protection and longevity. So when the glycocalyx is healthy, remember the blood is going to flow freely and connect that blood flow. We talked a lot about nitric oxide with Dr. Nathan Bryan. And if we have the right amount of nitric oxide, the levels are strong, then we can get improved oxygen delivery to the tissues. Think mitochondria here as well. And our brain stays optimal. But we need to pay attention to understanding if it becomes damaged. Because if this glycocalyx becomes damaged, our circulation suffers. And this is where you start noticing cold hands, cold feet, brain fog, low energy, and even changes in your blood pressure. So In functional medicine, we're learning that this microscopic layer plays a central role in aging, but also your endothelial health and cognitive performance. So if you've ever felt that you're doing all the right things, eating clean, you're doing your workouts, but you still feel foggy, inflamed, or just tired. And this could be the hidden layer that might need repair that no one's talked about. Now, how do you repair it? Let's talk about how you can restore and protect your barriers. And we'll talk about this in the end of the show. Your glycocalyx, your gut lining, and your blood-brain barrier. So I want you to keep this in mind as we chat today. Balancing your blood sugar by prioritizing your protein, healthy fats, and maybe fiber is not good for you. Some people that have gut issues, fiber is not great. But I think polyphenols are a great option for you to feed the good bacteria. I want you to work on reducing refined sugars, alcohol, and processed foods. Try using the BiotiQuest Sugar Shift. You can use my discount code, SAVE, use Coach Debbie Potts, and that will help redirect sugar metabolism towards antioxidant pathways. Try 12 to 14 hour overnight fasting. So stop eating 3 hours before bed. Go to bed by 10, so not eating after 7 or earlier. 5 p.m. is what I try to do. Unless I'm hungry, I have a little beef stick. And not eat 12 to 14 hours after that. That will help reduce glycation, and inflammation. So our goal is to reduce the oxidative stress and protect our endothelial lining. Now we want to rebuild that glycocalyx layer, so we'll talk about vitamin C, sulfur compounds as NAC, MSM, garlic, onions, omega-3s, polyphenols, and nitric oxide boosters, as we talk about with Dr. Nathan Bryan. You can also add hyaluronic acid and chondroitin sulfate for structural rebuilding and restore your vascular Teflon coating and enhance nutrient flow is your goal. Getting this glycocalyx layer stronger. Then we want to heal the gut lining. So we want to eliminate inflammatory foods, gluten, alcohol, sugar, seed oils. And then we want to rebuild that gut lining with L-glutamine, zinc carnosine, colostrum, and butyrate. And then I want you to re-inoculate with these probiotics that Dr. Davis talks about, L. reuteri, L. plantarum, and the strains that are in the sugar shift. So the goal is to seal the gut, reduce LPS, and lower the systemic inflammation. And then the brain. How do we store this gut-brain barrier? And our mitochondria. So supporting your mitochondria, CoQ10, PQQ, NAD precursors, and acetyl L-carnitine. So getting your meat, eating your organ meats, improving oxygenation, breath work, 4-7-8 breathing, red light therapy, sauna, nitric oxide as N101 lozenges I've been using morning and night. You can take those and try that out, as well as movement and your zone 2 training. That's what we want to get that mitochondria improved with oxygenation. And then protecting your neurons as essential fatty acids, DHA, curcumin, and again, polyphenol-rich foods as berries, green tea, and olive oil. So the goal here is to enhance neuroprotection, cognition, long-term resiliency. Now, lifestyle and detox foundations we work on individually, but sleeping, getting your 7 to 9 hours of quality restorative sleep to support the lymphatic drainage that happens while we're sleeping, ideally, if everything goes right. Now, we want to practice being more resilient. Daily stress regulation, we do 4-7-8 breathing. Breathing in, hold for 7, and exhale 8. Doing the 4 rounds of 4-7-8 breathing as much as you can during the day. Grounding, getting barefoot on the earth, on the sand, in the ocean water, on the grass, get more grounding in. And meditation, moving daily throughout the day to improve nitric oxide and lymphatic flow. Then I want to make sure your environment is clean. You're limiting your toxins around you as much as you can with your products in your household, mold, getting rid of plastics, even the kitchen utensils we got rid of, the plastic containers we stored food in, we switched to glass, and pesticides, heavy metals, being aware of all that. So here's the takeaway, the big picture. Let's zoom out. The glycocalyx and your gut and your brain barriers are your first and last lines of defense. When these barriers are strong, you will thrive. And my goal is to help us learn how to thrive as we age and not struggle with better focus, improved energy, and your mood is improved. Because when these barriers are weak and inflamed, your aging will accelerate. So by starting out with balancing your blood sugar, avoiding the spikes, restoring this glycocalyx layer, healing your gut, a lot of people forget about, supporting your mitochondrial function with those lifestyle habits first, and then supplement where needed. All of this together, you can create the best version of yourself in the future. I call the Future You program, improving your brain and your metabolism. We want to protect that brain as we age. I don't want this cognitive decline to happen. So don't wait until you have problems. If you are age 50 or higher, start now. If you're age 40, get on it. Don't wait until you're having memory, brain fog issues. A lot of people wait too long. We can do something now, taking ownership of our health today before we have those symptoms. So balance your blood sugar, restore the glycocalyx, heal your gut, support your mitochondria function so you can protect yourself, okay? Saying that a few times so you get it. So let's bring on Martha, and she'll share a little bit of her story and help us understand how the microbes in our gut and metabolic health science can transform our lives. So if you want to learn more on my favorite products, you can use my code, Coach Debbie Potts, to save. And remember, life is not a race, it is a journey. Take one step today to support your body, your brain, and your barriers from the inside out to improve the future you. So let me know if you have questions, reach out, and I can learn more from Martha and help us all be our best selves in the future. Thanks for listening. And again, taking ownership of your health and being curious. All right. I've got my fellow rabbit hole investigator, curious citizen scientist diving into what we keep learning more about. At least I learned from Martha about the glycocalyx layer. And Martha, I'm happy to have you back on the show after we finally met in person at the Metabolic Health Conference, more the Low Carb USA in Coronado Island, San Diego, in August, and just been wanting to do a new podcast with you to dive into what you're really learning and putting the missing pieces of a puzzle together to help improve our future self, specifically brain health, and avoiding this cognitive decline, which at middle age, I'm really on a mission to. So I brought you back on to dive into what you are learning.
Well, it's good to be back with you, and I'm excited to talk about the glycocalyx, which most people have probably never heard of.
You know, I throw people off asking about it. You are the one that told me about it. So why don't you just kind of unpack this fascinating science and we'll put this together. What is glyco, which you kind of have in a clue there, a glycocalyx layer, and what's your definition of it, first of all?
So the glycocalyx, glyco, sugar, so it's a sugar type molecule. It's the fuzzy layer, if you will, that surrounds all of our cells, all of the membranes in our body. So our blood vessels, our the gut lining, so the epithelial gut lining, that's glycocalyx, our blood-brain barrier. Pretty much everything is surrounded by this fuzzy glycocalyx. And bacteria also have a glycocalyx.
Hmm.
So that's we won't go down that rabbit hole at the moment.
How about I keep a notepad here? So you can go back to things that could. So microbiome, the bacteria itself, they have a layer around
They
them.
also have this fuzzy layer around the
Okay.
cell membrane. So, we talk a lot in biology about the cell membrane and what's going on in the membrane and all these pumps and receptors but if you really understand the scale of the system, a lot of what we attribute to the cell membrane isn't physically possible in the membrane because the membrane is so small. So a cell membrane is about 2 or 3 nanometers thick, and this fuzzy layer surrounding the cell, the glycocalyx, is about 50 nanometers thick.
Mm.
So 2 to 50, that's a pretty big scale difference. And then coming out of this glycocalyx is something called the endothelial surface layer. And that's like I like to equate it kind of to like seaweed, but it is these long sulfated polymers that have a negative charge at the end. So that negative charge keeps them like separated. And it's kind of like the easiest thing for me to visualize is it's almost like seaweed, which is like a filter in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what keeps. So if you were to look at a blood vessel, and there's some great research, like 35 years of research from Dr. Hans Vink, who was really one of the earliest pioneers, and he's photographed it inside the microvasculature of our blood vessels. And it looks like hair. I mean, it actually looks like the inside of our blood vessels are coated with hairs. And those are these sulfated polymers. And so they're made of chondroitin sulfate, keratin sulfate, and heparin sulfate, and hyaluronic acid is what all of this is made out of. And it's interesting sidebar. We won't go there, but that's also involved in basically the egg, the sperm in the egg, and what happens when the egg gets fertilized and a glycocalyx forms. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, this hair-like structure stretches out and shrinks back in depending on different electrolytes, different drugs, what it's coming in contact with. And that glycocalyx is a structure that's like it's the term they use is bicontinuous, which is not that intuitive for people to wrap their head around. But like if you think about a structure that, say, it was like this, and then all of a sudden it could morph into a tube or tubular structures. So it shifts. One analogy actually that was explained to me is it's like a city that today there's a bunch of materials coming in on airplanes, and so it turns into airstrips. And tomorrow there's a bunch of stuff coming in on boats, and all the airstrips go away, and it turns into canals for the boats. So it has this shape shifting capability in order to deliver gases, different molecules, and to sort and keep them where they should be. So like on this side of the blood, of the blood-brain barrier, or on this side of the vascular system. And when we talk about leaky gut or even, plaques in our blood vessels, all of these are weak spots in the glycocalyx. And that's how that ability to sort and keep things out when the glycocalyx gets damaged. That's our major protective layer.
Why is this not talked about or not known?
Well, that's the $1,000,000 question. Hans Vink worked on this for 35 years and had difficulty getting his papers published. And now it's really kind of, I'd say, coming up in prominence. There's also a researcher in Germany named Hans Oberleitner who's done a lot of research, and they've shown how glycocalyx damage is implicated in a lot of different chronic diseases.
Mm. So, if people don't know you, your background is diving deep into the microbiome as your husband had Parkinson's, passed away sadly from it, but lived a very long time with Parkinson's. And you've created your own probiotic company and other groups that you're doing a lot of work on help people understand the role of nutrition and lifestyle habits and the microbiome to improve our future self, specifically Parkinson's, but really cognitive health, how to improve it. And you've been doing this for how many years now?
Well, I've been into the microbiome for almost 11 years, 11, actually. Well, it'll be going into 12 years looking at the microbiome, but looking at the larger scale of what we've done to our food supply and how our food supply was affecting our health, that goes back 24, almost 24 years.
And so with that total 24-year time frame, you've been understanding how the body works and putting the missing pieces of the puzzle together with all your research and listening to other people that have had Parkinson's and understanding the role of the microbiome. How do you now see this connection between your somewhat maybe newest discovery of this glycocalyx layer and how is this all connecting together for you?
Well, actually, I had a really interesting conversation on Saturday. Um, we're doing a docu-series where we've interviewed people with Parkinson's, and we've done about 35 interviews, and I had somebody else in a totally different field who does a lot of research and connected to a lot of researchers in San Diego. And he called me on Saturday and, was asking me what I was up to. And I said I had been working on this docu-series, and many of the people with Parkinson's, I would say close to 90% of the people we talked to had had some kind of traumatic event, either immediately preceding the Parkinson's diagnosis or, at some period, some of them chronic long-term stress. But he actually said there's a researcher at UC San Diego who had been working with the Department of Defense to see if he could determine whether soldiers who were going out for deployment would get either sepsis or PTSD before they left to go out in the field. And so they did all this research, and part of what they found was this activation of the vagus nerve. And of course, guess what the vagus nerve is also coated with? Glycocalyx.
Wow.
And so, the vagus nerve is like connected to every organ in the body. It's carrying all these signals from our gut to our brain, and it's coated also with glycocalyx, which is, I'll say kind of a universal translator that is coming in contact with all of the things that are coming through the body and all the molecules we're making and sort of sorting them. So that connection to the neural network of the vagus nerve and the neural network, I'm using that as a term, but the network of the glycocalyx kind of all came together. And this gut-brain connection, of course, that's the huge piece of the puzzle that people are just starting to really understand, because so many of those neurotransmitters are made in the gut, and they're, signaling through that vagus nerve. And all of these pieces affect our cognitive health. So they've also shown that the aggregated proteins that have been associated with Parkinson's can move up the vagus nerve into the brain. I don't know if they've shown that the beta amyloid from Alzheimer's moves up into the brain, but they have shown in both cases the brain post-mortem colonized by microbes. And so that permeability of the blood-brain barrier, is clearly a problem. And you want to make sure that you have, a healthy glycocalyx with, integrity, so that these toxins and things aren't kind of making it across and causing inflammation in the brain.
So going back to so we've gone over the glycocalyx layer is a sugar-rich. I can't think of a caterpillar, but you're saying sea
Yeah.
kelp in the ocean. But just think of these little sugary things, fuzzy stuff on protective layer, on vascular, gut wall lining, brain, everywhere seems to be pretty
Yeah.
much. And how this ties in to the gut wall lining and leaky gut, and then going into leaky gut often leads to leaky brain and the blood brain barrier being damaged. And how is this connected? And we'll work our way towards what goes wrong.
Well, I mean, one of the areas that has been a big focus for me has been endotoxin. So the gram-negative bacteria in the gut can produce their cell walls, either as they grow and die off, or if you kill them with antibiotics, or however they die off. And they can actually excrete the lipopolysaccharide endotoxin in their outer membrane proteins. So they're producing this endotoxin, and it's very immunogenic, I'll say, and can create inflammation really anywhere in the body. And when you have a leaky gut, that is where that layer is supposed to be protecting you, and the endotoxin can get across, breach that barrier, and get into your bloodstream and really go anywhere in the body. So it can go to your brain and cause inflammation, or it can go to your joints and cause inflammation. And so endotoxin is just kind of one of those pieces of the puzzle. But in the gut, or just bacteria in general, they produce a lot of toxins. So they have an incredible arsenal of weapons. I have a book called The Comprehensive Book of Bacterial Protein Toxins, and it's about this thick. And, some of them are what are called pore-forming toxins. That means they poke a little hole. They poke a hole in one of our cells, or they can poke a hole in that glycocalyx lining to get to the cell membrane to then get into the cell. So they have a large arsenal of weaponry at their disposal. And so focusing on your gut health is really key to your overall health, because you don't want a high load of those gram-negative bacteria.
Mhm. So when you're speaking of the gut wall lining, leaky gut being broken down, and these LPS leak out, causing this endotoxicity in the rest of the body. Now we picture the gut wall lining and how thin it is, but we're finding that it's not just that lining. We also have a lining, the glycocalyx layer on top of that lining.
Well, I mean, it really is
Or is there one?
that whole lining is, glycocalyx, and, the single cell that,
Yeah,
if
the
you,
gut wall lining. We think of it
the
as a
gut wall
single
lining.
cell, but there is
Yeah.
the research
But
showing
all
that
those
glycocalyx
cells, yeah, all those cells are coated by a glycocalyx. So you have that
sugar
layer.
coating.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not like there's a barrier and then another barrier. There's just all one,
Yeah.
but that gets broken down and these LPS leak out, and that can cause all sorts of chaos in the rest of the body. And then if the blood-brain barrier gets broken down, that LPS, those endotoxins, can get into the brain. And how would that happen?
So, I mean, that's a good question. I probably can't answer the details of that, but what I can tell you is there are animal models using the LPS endotoxin to induce Parkinson's, certain aspects of Alzheimer's, uh, depression, diabetes, anxiety. So if you go look at PubMed and you just type whatever your chronic disease is and you type endotoxin, you'll find that there's some kind of cell model around that. So it is one of the kind of key drivers of inflammation in the body. And it's also something that the immune system can become tolerant to. So I think this is one of the kind of issues that maybe isn't discussed that much. The body can become intolerant or not intolerant, but tolerant to the LPS. And so it won't mount an immune response like it should. And so the LPS is there, but the body's not mounting an immune response to get rid of it. And the more you're exposed to it, the less the immune system gets activated. And so over time, as obviously as you age and you're impacted by these microbes throughout your life, you have a higher exposure level when you're older than when you're younger.
Yeah, it just seems that that comes down to the vagus nerve and endotoxins.
Yeah.
It just always seems to be always in the conversation. And it's funny, Karan of Microbiome Labs, he's the one that I first started learning this at our nutritional therapy conferences back in 2016, or I think it was when we started having
Yeah.
conferences with his presentation on leaky gut and endotoxicity. And it's, almost about 10 years diving into it. It's just still, he's out there speaking about it, but it is kind of going, how is this all connected to looking at the root cause for all these different symptoms of chronic diseases people are having, and how it's looking at the root cause, diving in deeper to figure out what else is going on that's causing all these symptoms. And people are not getting healthier because they're just getting medications as band-aids to treat the symptoms and not
Symptoms.
work on the why.
Well, and you want the gut to be anaerobic. And one of the key drivers of these gram-negative bacteria that produce the endotoxin is they can survive in an oxygen-rich environment. And the good bacteria like bifidobacteria, especially bifidobacteria and Akkermansia, are very oxygen intolerant. And so if you have a gut that is either mostly aerobic or periodically aerobic, you're going to kill off the good bifidobacteria, and you're going to end up with a higher load of these endotoxin producing bacteria. So, and the study we did in diabetes on the sugar shift product actually showed that we returned the gut to an anaerobic environment, restored the bifidobacteria, and significantly reduced serum endotoxin in the blood and the endotoxin markers in the microbiome.
So stop, just since you brought that up, because I make your sugar shift yogurt. I call it ProGurt all the time. We've talked to Dr. William Davis many times, talking about practical steps people can take today to protect their gut and brain, neurodegenerative risk factors. Looking at the sugar shift, talk a little bit what that is, because I always share little videos on my Instagram making it, and it takes me literally 5 minutes. But why is it formulated the way it is, and why should people take it, or should they take it, or when?
Well, so it was formulated originally, I made it for my husband to convert glucose and fructose into mannitol because there was some research showing that mannitol could stop the aggregation of the proteins in an animal model and pull the proteins out of the brain. And, mannitol is interesting because it's also an osmoprotectant, which we think is also protective for the glycocalyx. We didn't know that at the time. But it's converting glucose and fructose into mannitol, and mannitol feeds good bacteria, but many of the pathogenic bacteria can't use mannitol as a sugar to grow on. They prefer glucose and fructose. So by kind of shifting the whole terrain through putting in this system of bugs. And, one of the main bugs that produces mannitol is L. reuteri, which Dr. Davis talks about, and Bacillus subtilis, which he's now swapped out the coagulants for the subtilis. It's interesting, too, because Bacillus subtilis has also been known in the past as hay bacillus. So it was that bacillus that was on the grasses that we would breathe in. And it makes a surfactant protein that's it's interesting. I mean, I can't say definitively it comes from the bacteria, but there's a structure of the glycocalyx in the lungs that requires the surfactant proteins that build the structure. And one of those is actually made by Bacillus subtilis. So who knows? That's just speculation on my part, but kind of interesting. So reuteri, the Bacillus subtilis, and also leuconostoc mesenteroides, which you won't find in most probiotics, but you'll find in most fermented foods. And that makes an exopolysaccharide. And those exopolysaccharides, I think, help feed the glycocalyx, and it's almost like an artificial mucin that can be, protecting the gut. So when you ferment your yogurt, sometimes you can see it's kind of a congealed type, and that's what that exopolysaccharide is in there.
So what is the main goal for people to use the sugar shift culture starter to make their ProGert? What do they want to do it for?
Well, most of the people who are doing it have, they've been followers of Dr. Davis and his focus on SIBO. But, oftentimes they're looking for general gut health. They're looking for, addressing SIBO. It can be beneficial in SIBO because the culture together as it grows, it actually feeds the growth of the L. reuteri. I'm going to turn my light on.
I know, get in the dark. We're different time zones. I've got the sun setting in an hour or 2 hours. So you've got the sun setting now.
It's already starting to set here.
Yeah. So I think it's understanding the why of everything and understanding what should I do to improve gut health, to improve my brain health, and improve how I age? So talking about the microbiome, the glycocalyx layer, and making this sugar shift ProGert that I have often weekly, because I just actually had some with some cottage cheese and raspberries. But understanding always, why do I need to make this? Why should I take it? I think is important for people to understand. Why is it important to improve your microbiome with these different bacteria, and the sugar shift part, how that helps in a positive way, not thinking it's going to raise my blood sugar or balance my blood sugar, but you're really finding it sounds to improve that barrier in all of our linings of the glycocalyx with this, perhaps.
Well, I mean, we haven't studied specifically the glycocalyx, but we have looked at mannitol and how mannitol interacts with the glycocalyx. The other thing I would say, just generally, good gut health the gut is tied to so many different diseases, but back to the glycocalyx, there's some key things that you need in your diet to support a healthy glycocalyx. So it's made, as I said, of sulfated polymers. So, you need the sulfur amino acids for that. And it's also made of hyaluronic acid, which that is a fiber. It doesn't sound like a fiber, but hyaluronic acid is the one fiber that you get on a carnivore diet if you're eating nose to tail. And so, hyaluronic acid is key for glycocalyx health, and the sulfated polymers. So things like seaweed, or sea moss. If you know sea moss, it's kind of like an applesauce.
Yeah, I tried it. My bottles, I had a whole bunch of it, and I didn't really like it, and then I threw it all away because it got moldy. So I didn't eat it.
Yeah, you don't want. I have one brand. I'll dig it out and send it to you that I like, that it tastes good and but I also bought the version that you make yourself where they send you the dry seaweed and then
Oh,
you soak it and then you
yeah.
blend it up in the blender. And I was like, okay, that's not going to work
That's
for
too
me.
much work.
But there's also there is a supplement called Revasca that it has seaweed and inner leaf of aloe vera. You can have aloe vera will also help. And it has some polyphenols and the enzymes catalase and SOD. And that's they've done a lot of research. Actually, that supplement is connected with Hans Vink and
Mm.
all of his research. And he's shown how he has a device that can actually measure the health of your glycocalyx by looking at the vasculature underneath your tongue.
Mm.
And they've shown that that supplement can improve the vascular health. And, COVID actually does a lot of damage to the glycocalyx. So they've been doing some research more recently in long COVID, I think, to show that. And then there's a supplement like years ago that somebody told me about called Ambrotose,
Hmm.
which I think is also glycocalyx support. It's pretty pricey. It's like a tub like this is $165. But it also has like fucoidin, which is what is one of the active components out of the seaweed.
So, I'm always looking for real food base. I think people are just over supplementing and they
Yep.
get supplement fatigue, especially when we start them on their foundation phase, working on let's clean up everything and work the drainage pathways and support liver detoxification and cell membranes. So people don't want to take a whole bunch of stuff, but that's why I love making the probiotic
Yep.
ProGerd, I call it, because
Well,
it's not,
seaweed.
yeah, kelp.
Yeah. Just like,
Yeah,
it
I've
may
tried those flakes. I always forget to use those too. So I always like to look at what are some ways we can get good nutrition into our body as the fermentation of making this probiotic that we're talking about, then getting kelp. And so you're saying organ meat, if you're like, I do my organ capsules a few days a week that I order online, my full script, but I don't like liver. So I know hyaluronic acid is better to eat from organ meat, but that's not happening in my world. Septic capsules. But what else do you find is important nutritional therapy for improving our gut health microbiome as you did your research on Parkinson's, but just overall to support this endotoxicity to avoid that and gut barrier breakdown?
well, people have, as they age, they lose stomach acid, and what I would say is probably overdiagnosis of I don't like
PPIs?
PPIs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that makes the problem worse. And actually, there was just a paper, I think, that came out this last week connecting Parkinson's and PPIs. And I was like, that's not surprising to me because I've talked to a number of people with Parkinson's who took, PPIs for 10 years before they got diagnosed with Parkinson's. And you're
Yeah.
supposed to have a high level of acid in your stomach, so a very low pH, because that's what kills all the bad bacteria. And, if you have a higher pH, then you're not going to be breaking down your food as well. You're not going to be killing those bacteria. And I have a recipe on my website for something called fire cider.
Ugh.
And like, I think that is one of the best digestive supplements because it's got ginger, horseradish, um, turmeric, garlic, habanero peppers,
Wow. There's a
lemon.
reason.
Yeah, lemon, apple cider vinegar, um, rosemary, thyme, honey, and distilled water. I think that's an onions.
Wow.
So I have a video on YouTube on the BiotiQuest YouTube channel, And then I have a blog, the written blog recipe. But you can make that fire cider. I make it in a 1/2-gallon jug. You ferment it for about 6 weeks, and then you drain the stuff off, and you just take a shot of it before you eat, and you'll have plenty of stomach acid. It's hot and spicy. But like people want, I just actually learned this week that the betaine HCl that a lot of people recommend that people take is actually could potentially be a problem for the glycocalyx.
Well, I was taught if you want to make sure you don't take that if you have H. pylori. So you want to make sure you get your H. pylori overgrowth resolved before you add in betaine HCl, because that makes your stomach more acidic, and you want to make sure the H. pylori counts down first.
Yeah.
But that really ties into the why, as I talked to Dr. Davis about this too. It's like, all right, let's work backwards. Why do we have poor stomach acid, and where does that come from? The vagus nerve always. It's always being in that fight or flight and getting vagus nerve toxicity, that shutting off our parasympathetic rest and digest state. So one, we're eating that way. Plus, the other side is listening to Dr. Nathan Bryan on nitric oxide and everyone using mouthwash and having that problem. And then all these people, on PPIs, and just how the research is just crazy on all these different root causes when you look at what has happened to our digestive system.
I'm going to dig out my other favorite thing that I don't.
It's like a science lab back there.
Yeah, I don't do it. I try to do it every day, but this is what's left. I need to make a new batch of my beet kvass.
Yeah. I've been taking a shot of the fermented beets. I just got a powder and full script, but trying that in the morning.
So this is so simple to make. So you cut up a couple of beets, you take your whey from the sugar shift yogurt that you made. So if people don't know what whey is, that's the yellow stuff that kind of forms. You take a 1/4 cup of whey, a tablespoon of mineral salt like Redmond's or Baja. You put that in there and you fill it with distilled water and you set it on the counter for 3 days.
Wow.
And then it turns into this fizzy, fantastic microbial mixture that helps support nitric oxide production and the nitric oxide producing bacteria. And so you can swish that around. I actually, sometimes, I don't know if this is smart or not, but sometimes I actually swish it around in my mouth after I brush my teeth before I go to bed at night.
Oh.
Because I'm like, I kind of want those microbes kind of.
Well, we took the nitric oxide tablet. I started doing this yesterday, a new experiment, taking the N101 from Dr. Nathan Bryan sells nitric oxide lozenges. I was taking in the morning, and I took it at night before bed last night to see if it helps sleep, just help blood flow recovery. I was had a good sleep, so I don't know, trying it out. So I think what we're talking about is how the body works together as metabolic harmony. Everything has to be working order, north to south, starting getting that sympathetic out of sympathetic fight or flight to get more parasympathetic. So we're actually improving our resiliency. So talking about building up that vagus nerve, so we call that vagal tone, and that will help improve digestion. The first line of defense, we're talking about the microbiome, including the oral microbiome, and working our way down to the stomach. And so the stomach needs to be acidic, so to kill off those bad microbes. If that isn't happening, which so many people, biggest rant, I'm going to do a third podcast on the stomach acid and PPIs because so many people are on them. And I was listening to research on that. Side note, they were only supposed to be used for
like
2 weeks.
10 days or something.
Yeah,
I mean, it
2
says
weeks.
on there, don't use beyond 10 days.
And it was never approved by the FDA, but somehow I've had people on them for 10, 30 years, and I was going to take a Target. I was there the other day, had a whole row of all these Pepsid and all the antacids. Like, people have no clue what they're doing to their body. So go into another episode on that, but the stomach has to be acidic so we don't get the microbes, bad guys coming in. So it's supposed to be acidic to kill off the bad guys. And so when we talked about SIBO with different doctors, learning about, okay, is it small intestinal bacteria overgrowth? all right, well, how did that happen? We still need to resolve the root cause for why are we having these pathogens in our body and this microbe overgrowth, opportunistic bacteria. So even though we're doing all this stuff in the gut, we still need to address how did it get there in the first place, right?
Right.
And then working down towards the microbiome and then the gut wall lining, sealing that up, and then the brain.
So I'm gonna
So
add one more ringer into your thing of for people to avoid, that damages the it damages cell membranes. Glycocalyx is all these, soaps and cleaners and everything in our like all of our household cleaners, our shampoos, even some toothpaste contain what are called quaternary ammonium
oh,
compounds.
you guys are talking about that. Yeah.
And I just wrote a Substack about this, but Dr. Nenham, whom I'm working on the Parkinson's paper with, he did work on this back in the 1980s, the mid 1980s, showing that they incorporate into the cell membranes,
Mm-hmm.
and over time they're like a little, I'll say a ball with a little tail, a
Yeah.
head group with a tail, and they're on the outside of the cell membrane, and then they flip to the inside of the membrane, and they're immunosuppressive, and they can last for up to 9 months was when he stopped his research. And of course, if you're constantly, you know, every day, or maybe not even every day, but every week, if you're constantly coming in contact with these cleaners and things that are immunosuppressant, that's another way that your body's then not able to recognize and knock out the bad guys.
Mm. So I know we can talk for hours. I want to go back into Parkinson's because we were talking about this when you're in town. And what are you really finding? The correlations to people that have Parkinson's. And so learning what we can do now in middle age so we can avoid all the neurodegeneration diseases, not just Parkinson's, but I'm on a mission to not have dementia, cognitive health issues, Alzheimer's,
So
Parkinson's, dementia. It seems like everyone just thinks that's just what's going to happen as we get older.
and that doesn't have to be the case. Now,
Yes.
this is a new book by Ray Dorsey. I don't know.
The
Can you see it?
Parkinson's plan. Yep.
Yes. And I think he does a fantastic job of talking about total toxic burden.
Mm.
And they have a section in the back of 25 things you can do. It's
Mm.
called the Parkinson's 25. And
Mm.
it's 25 things that you can do to or avoid. So, and these are things we talk about a lot. Wash your produce, even the organic ones, because they have chemicals on them. Change your diet. I mean, that's what we're all talking about. Eat real food, whole food. Make sure your grocery store is safe. I mean, that was interesting when he was talking about the dry clean exposure to dry cleaning. Groceries are often next door to dry cleaners.
Oh, wow.
And there's potential exposure to that. But anyway, it goes into a lot of details. Now, what he doesn't do is connect it to the microbiome. He has like
Mm.
one little tiny section in there. And if you know the microbiome, you can read a book like that and sort of connect the dots. But your average person with Parkinson's is not going to connect the dots to all these toxins that he's talking about and the total toxic burden and what that does to your microbiome. So
So
I
what
think
does
it's a bit.
Martha Carlin say? If you wrote part 2 or your own follow-up to that, what would Martha say?
If I wrote part 2 to that, I would show them how the things that he's teaching them to avoid affect the microbiome, and then I would teach them how to care for, the feeding and care of the microbiome and the glycocalyx, which is, you know, that's your main line of defense. So, and that's what we need is we need a good line of defense, and we've just kind of trashed our line of defense with all the toxic burden that we're exposed to all the time now.
Mm-hmm. So then what are practical steps we can start doing today to strengthen the gut and the brain? We
So,
talked a lot. Let's summarize.
yeah. So, I mean, you want to support that glycocalyx. So we talked about the foods that can do that. So, seaweed, the
Organ
nose to
meat.
tail eating or organ meats where you're getting the hyaluronic acid. You want to support your gut health. So you want an anaerobic gut. So the sugar shift yogurt is a great way to do that. If you don't want to make yogurt, you can take the sugar shift
Okay,
capsules.
wait, pause
But
there.
it's
I
so
do not
easy.
cook. I do not cook. Neil does all the cooking. I make the yogurt. It literally takes me 5 minutes. It's one scoop,
It's so easy
half
to
and
make.
half. If anyone says they can't make it or they don't have time, just
Well,
give me
I
a
get
call.
some people who are like, they don't do milk. And so, like, maybe let's talk for a minute about milk, because there is a connection with Parkinson's and milk.
Hmm.
So the Harvard study showed that it was the Harvard doctors and nurses study, that the people, and it was 50,000 people who drank low fat milk, not high fat milk, but low fat milk, had a statistically significant risk of Parkinson's. But, when we look at what's happened to our milk supply, and people don't talk about this, but milk, before it's pasteurized, has a lot of bioactive compounds in it. It has lactoferrin, it has immunoglobulins, it has a lot of things that could be a first line of defense that bind up toxins and get rid of them. But when you pasteurize the milk, you get rid of all. I mean, they're all dead. They don't work. So that's one of the problems with milk. And then uh, a lot of the cows in the dairy supply now are fed GMO feed, higher glyphosate load. So, there's a kind of a downstream effect on the quality of the milk and the health of the cows and all of that. So, but, when you make a yogurt, you're adding back some bioactive compounds, enzymes, because the bacteria in there are kind of restoring that. But a lot of people are dairy sensitive. You can make the yogurt with coconut milk or nut milks, but nut milks have emulsifiers in them, and those are damaging to the glycocalyx. But
Yeah.
the coconut milk process for the yogurt is, it's a lot more complicated. It's
I've
not like
tried it.
somebody like, I'm not going to make it, and I
Yeah.
cook. I've done it a few times and every one's been a failure, but I do know people who make it time after time and it's perfect for them, but it doesn't turn out that way for me. So anyway, like, focus on your gut health, focus on eating whole, nutrient dense food as much as possible. I talk to people a lot about the Terry Wall's protocol and Lori Mishley. Lori Mishley has an app called I think it's called Pro Parkinson's or something. She is tracking a lot of dietary stuff and has great resources for how to eat healthy with Parkinson's. And the same things would apply for Alzheimer's and your brain health, in terms of the foods you want to avoid, and, good quality foods you want to get into the system. I mean, I think the hardest part is, as we age, often we're single, or, it's a two, a couple that's older and doesn't have the energy to cook or doesn't feel like cooking. And, the importance of real food does require some cooking. I've actually been talking to a Parkinson's Foundation in Denver that John was involved with about doing some kind of community meal stuff. You know how they have like those dream dinners and
Yeah.
that you can, but, just think about if we had community oriented things where people with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or, whatever, could come together, or their families could come together and get help, chopping and cooking and doing all that. And everybody goes home with a package of meals or at least some of their meals for the week, and has, healthy food. And that's a barrier for a lot of people.
So what else can we do to strengthen our brain health? What have you found with the Parkinson's, but besides the nutrition part, what else can we do?
Well,
Middle
I mean,
age.
a lot of the stuff that John's group did was around exercise, but exercise along with brain teasers. So for their biking class that they did at the pedaling for Parkinson's that they ran at the YMCA, they would ride the bike, but also while they were riding, they would do music trivia, Trivial Pursuit cards, like all these kind of different questions at different times to kind of just like keep them going. And then, boxing has also been shown to be really great for brain health because you're calling out, um, I mean, not the punching part. They don't actually
Yeah.
punch. They do the boxing training, but that training, because part of Parkinson's is the loss of coordination between the two sides of the body. And so
Mhm.
that you have to listen to somebody call out the punch, whether it's a jab or a cross, and that requires, you know, brain agility. And so they've actually shown that the part, I think it's called punch, something power punch,
Oh.
that they're rolling out across the US. In some of the bigger cities, you can do a power punch class, and that can be really helpful for the brain too.
Hmm. Yeah, I've done that when I used to go to my World Fitness Convention. We'd have classes that you have to count or, like work the brain and
Or
think,
do,
throwing a
yeah,
ball
do.
back and forth. Yeah.
There's
Call out.
somebody I follow on Instagram that does these weird things with their
Sign
hand,
language.
which is great for your, is also great for your brain. But, the other thing I will say is probably the most underappreciated is breathing
Mm,
exercises and learning to, because when we're in that fight or flight, we're also taking very shallow breaths.
mm,
And the production of nitric oxide and a lot of the gasotransmitters in the body that requires us to be fully oxygenated, not in our gut, in our lungs and in
mm,
our blood supply. And so you want to be able to take those, deep, powerful breaths. And that's also, just three little breaths when you're stressed, or,
mhm,
set a timer every 2 hours and just say,
mm,
I'm going to take three deep breaths, every 2 hours. And then,
mm,
maybe you can go to every hour. And then it becomes a habit because you start to learn how to open your chest up and really
mm.
take a deep breath again.
That's a huge one and free. And it's something you don't have to take anything with you. It's just
Right.
yourself. And my root cause doc program I work with, we do the 4-7-8 breath work and understanding the breath hold, how that can help the 4 inhale, hold for 7 and exhale slowly 8 or let go. I think it depends on the time of day. If I breathe out through my nose or my mouth, just letting go. It really helps, and I think understanding the connection of nasal breathing and the nervous system and the vagus nerve and connecting that with nitric oxide, which helps blood flow, and how connecting that, if there was any correlation to neurocognitive decline, neurodegeneration with lack of blood flow, if that's related to the loss of nitric oxide production as we age due to stress and the medications as PPIs and people using mouthwash. It's just how we go down those rabbit holes, like, "Wait a
It's
minute, isn't this
crazy.
all
Yeah.
connected?"
It's all connected. I had this strange, I'll say strange, interesting. When I first started the BioCollective, that was back in 2015. In 2016, I went to a microbiome meeting in London, and after after the day's meeting, I went out to dinner by myself, and I had a really lovely dinner, and then I listened to a musician in Trafalgar Square, and I was walking back, and my phone was about to die, and I'm following the map on my phone, and it takes me down this very dark street,
Golly.
and I was like, "Ooh, this is kinda creepy." And I look up, and the street divides like this, and there's a billboard right at the top of, and it says, everything is connected. And I was like, yes, it is. I was like,
Oh,
okay.
there you go. So I
Yeah.
think it's just important to look at that and how we like to zoom out, to zoom in and putting the pieces together that working backwards. Why does that happen? All right, why does that happen? As we should do another show, the polyphenols and the color, the phytonutrients that you were saying, well, why does that make it work having polyphenols for your microbiome? And that was a whole another topic we talked about. But
Well, I mean, that's a rabbit hole. I'll have to go back study again because I
yeah,
got deep down the rabbit hole on the pigments of life,
yeah,
basically.
no, you
You
did
know,
that to me
polyphenols
when
are,
we met.
yeah, are,
That's
they're,
crazy.
they're the colors and they actually come, uh, down that shikimate pathway,
Mhm. Yeah, that was
you know.
interesting. All right, so today we tried to focus on microbiome, glycocalyx layer, how to protect our gut and protect our brain, and how this is important for good cognitive health as we age, especially your research is on Parkinson's, but just overall cognitive health as we age. I am on a mission to not wait until the symptoms show up and really working on our microbiome and the glycocalyx, the health of it, so we can be part of this longevity program I'm calling the Future You plan, figure out what to do now because I think if we don't take action when we're feeling good, that's when, if
That's
you
when
don't
you
do
can
that, you're in
actually
trouble.
do something and turn back the tide. And that's really one of my goals is for people to start to understand. And I think, with Ray's book, he's also trying to get people to understand there's a lot you can do now.
Mhm.
And even if you got diagnosed with Parkinson's, if you go to a neurologist, they're not going to tell you that there's anything you can do. But
No.
there's so much you can do to lead a healthier, more quality of life and
Mhm.
live longer and happier. And the people in the Netherlands have shown that because they have a whole person program that really works on exercise, diet, lifestyle, all these pieces that
Mhm.
fit into it, and they're people with Parkinson's in the Netherlands live much longer, much healthier lives. So there's a lot you can do. So, and don't sit down in the chair and give up. Really start to think about and take action. And if you know, don't have Parkinson's, but you're worried because somebody in your family has it, you know, there's a lot you can do to not get it.
Mhm.
So, take action.
So where can people find you to join your group and to learn more? And you've got different challenges, the sugar shift.
So, you can find, me on biotiquest.com. That's BIOTIQUEST.com. And you can sign up for our newsletter there. We also have a Sugar Shift Challenge. So we have a Facebook page. If you want to join the Sugar Shift Challenge Facebook page, you can sign up there. And we have calls every 2 weeks. We bring in speakers. Sometimes it's just me answering questions and talking to people. And then periodically, we do some different things like we did Ben Azadi's 30-day reset, and we're going to do another one of those for the spirituality and health audience. We have that starting October 10th. And so, people could join that again if they want to do the 30-day reset.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for diving into all this fun stuff. And we can get the resources out in the show notes so people can learn more and how to make the sugar shift as it is my easy thing that I do. Actually, I had another batch to make tonight. So
Okay.
join me on the challenge and put it on your Instagram. I keep trying to share my little videos, help people improve
Well,
their gut health.
I should post a picture of my beautiful batch I just made.
Oh, yeah, you should do more videos on it. I like sharing
Yeah.
them because, again, it's the easiest thing I've ever made. And it's such a powerful food to add into my gut, not have to take more supplements.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
All right. Well, thanks for doing what you're doing and keep following your passion and your mission, and we will follow along and keep learning.
Great. Thanks for having me, Debbie.